Just sign it, my wife demanded with her attorney watching. I signed my name and walked out. The next morning, her lawyer called, his voice a whisper. I ran a background check on him. Judith, who did you marry? She thought she'd married a simple contractor. She had no idea what I actually did for a living. My name is Elliot Garrison. I'm 59 years old, and for the last 32 years, I've made my living helping dying companies figure out how to distribute their assets without bleeding out in court. Bankruptcy restructuring, they call it. I prefer to think of it as building lifeboats while the ship's already sinking. It's methodical work, quiet work, the kind that teaches you to read the fine print and always have an exit strategy. I just never thought I'd need one for my own marriage. The day it all started to unravel was a Tuesday, October 15th. Judith was hosting her 47th birthday party at the house. Our house, though I'd learned soon enough that our was a word with some pretty flexible definitions. She'd invited 30 people, most of them from her interior design circle. Champagne flutes, those little canapes nobody actually eats, a jazz trio she hired for atmosphere. I bought her a necklace, white gold, sapphires. Cost me $4,000, which she would have known if she'd ever bothered looking at her statements. I had it wrapped in cream paper with a silk ribbon. When I handed it to her, she barely glanced at it, just set it on the side table next to someone's empty wine glass and turned to the man standing beside her. I just want to thank Troy, Judith announced, loud enough for the whole room to hear. Her voice had that performative lilt she used when she wanted applause. For everything he's done to help me finally take control of my own future. Troy Mitchell, 31 years old, Harvard Law, silk tie, and a smile that belonged on a game show host. He raised his glass like he just won something. I stood there holding my own champagne, untouched, and felt something shift. Not anger, not yet, just a cold, clarifying realization that I was watching a script I hadn't been given. 3 days later, she walked into my study with Troy beside her. No knock, no preamble. We need you to sign something, Judith said, dropping a folder onto my desk like she was serving divorce papers. Though technically, that's not what they were. Not yet. I opened it. Power of attorney. Full financial control. Retroactive clauses. Legal jargon, dressed up to look like a formality. It's just to streamline things, she continued, arms crossed. You'll still have access. You just won't have control. Troy stood there, silent, watching me with the focus of a hawk sizing up a field mouse. I read the first page, then the second. I didn't rush. Judith's heel tapped against the hardwood floor. Just sign it, she snapped, her patience evaporating. Troy's here as a witness. This is simple, Elliot. Don't make it complicated. I looked up at her, then at him, then back at the document, and I signed it. No argument, no pushback, just my name, clean and deliberate, at the bottom of the page. Judith exhaled like she'd been holding her breath. Troy smirked just a little. I stood, pushed the folder back toward them, and walked out of the room. Behind me, I heard Troy chuckle. Well, that went easier than expected. Judith's laugh followed. Light, dismissive, victorious. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that the document I just signed wasn't theirs. It was mine. Judith's phone started buzzing at 6:43 in the morning. I know because I was already awake, sitting in the kitchen with black coffee in yesterday's Wall Street Journal, pretending to read about interest rate projections while really just listening. She answered on the fourth ring, voice thick with sleep and irritation. Troy, it's not even 7. This better be important. I couldn't hear his response, but I didn't need to. The way her spine stiffened told me everything. She sat up in bed. I could hear the sheets rustling through the open bedroom door down the hall. What do you mean you ran a background check? Her voice climbed half an octave. We've been married for 14 years. I know who he is. Silence. Long enough that I took another sip of coffee. That's impossible, she said, quieter now. Confused. Elliot fixes broken companies. He's a restructuring consultant. Troy cut her off. I imagined him pacing his pristine downtown office, tie already loosened, realizing he'd walked into something he wasn't prepared for. Judith. She whispered his name like she was trying to anchor herself. Who did I marry? I set my mug down gently. Didn't make a sound. She appeared in the kitchen doorway 3 minutes later, barefoot, silk robe hanging open over pajamas, phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline. Her face was pale, eyes red-rimmed, not from crying, from panic. "We need to talk," Judith said. I folded the newspaper slowly, deliberately. "About? Troy says you're not just a consultant." "I'm not," I replied calmly. "I'm a bankruptcy restructuring specialist." "I thought you knew that." She shook her head, frustration bubbling up. "He said you've worked with the Justice Department, that you testified in federal cases, that you—" She stopped, searching for words. "That you've taken apart billion-dollar corporations. When they deserved it, yes." Her hand trembled slightly. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I met her eyes. "You never asked, Judith. In 14 years, you never once asked what I actually did. You just care that the check's cleared." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "Troy also said—" She hesitated, voice dropping. "He said the document I had you sign. There's a clause. Something about third-party legal influence." "There is," I confirmed. "What does that mean?" I stood, rinsed my coffee mug in the sink, and turned to face her. "It means the moment you brought an attorney into our home to pressure me into signing away my financial rights, you activated a failsafe I wrote into that document 7 years ago. The power of attorney you think you have, it voided itself the second Troy walked through that door." Judith's mouth opened. "Closed. That's not possible." "It's entirely possible. I built that clause specifically for this scenario. You want to control, Judith. I gave you pen and paper. What you didn't realize is that I'd already drawn the borders of the battlefield." She stepped back, steadying herself against the doorframe. "So what happens now?" "Now." I picked up my car keys from the counter. "Now you call Troy back and ask him to explain the rest of what he found. Because if he did his job right, he also discovered that our joint accounts were restructured 32 days ago, that the house title's been held in a closed trust since 2018, and that your access to anything with my name on it expired the moment you decided I was an obstacle instead of partner." Her face drained of color. "You're lying." "I don't need to lie, Judith. I just needed you to underestimate me." I walked past her toward the garage. "Oh, and one more thing. That necklace I gave you at your party, the one you didn't bother opening, it's worth $4,200. You might want to sell it. You're going to need the cash." I left her standing there, phone buzzing in her hand, Troy probably calling back with more bad news. The garage door closed behind me with a soft, final click. The county clerk's office smelled like old paper and burnt coffee. I'd been there twice before, once to file the original trust documents, once to update them when Judith started getting too interested in our financial future. Both times, I'd walked out with exactly what I needed: legal protection wrapped in bureaucratic anonymity. Judith showed up 3 days after our kitchen confrontation. I knew because Margaret called me from her office up north. "Your wife just tried to pull the property deed," Margaret said, her voice calm and professional as always. Clerk told her there's no record of her name on the title. I was standing in a hardware store parking lot in Burlington, 50 miles from home, picking up supplies for a project that didn't exist. Just keeping busy, staying visible, letting her flail. "How'd she take it?" I asked. "About as well as you'd expect. She threw her phone at the wall, apparently. Didn't break, but the clerk said she could hear it from the next room." I allowed myself a small smile. "Did she ask about the trust?" "She tried. They told her it's a closed trust, been active since 2016. She demanded to see the documents. They explained that closed trusts aren't public record, and she'd need a court order." 2016. 2 years before we even talked about buying the house on Lexington Ridge. The house Judith had personally redesigned, top to bottom, spending $60,000 on imported tile and custom cabinetry. The house, she told everyone in her book club, was finally exactly what I always dreamed of. The house that had never, not for a single day, belonged to her. She's still there. I asked Margaret. "Left about 10 minutes ago. Looked like she was heading to a lawyer's office." "Let me guess. Troy's." Margaret chuckled softly. "Probably. You want me to do anything?" "No. Just keep the files locked. She'll try again. They always do." I hung up and stood there for a moment, keys in hand, watching a young couple load paint cans into their trunk. They were laughing about something, probably arguing over colors, probably thinking they were building a life together. I used to think that too. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I hadn't seen in 6 years. "Dad, we need to talk. Call me. Lauren." I stared at the message. Lauren, my daughter from my first marriage. 34 years old. Marine JAG officer turned civilian defense attorney. We'd been estranged since Judith came into my life. Not because Lauren hated her, but because Judith made it clear there wasn't room for both of them. I called. She picked up on the first ring. Took you long enough. I'm in a parking lot in Burlington, I said. What's going on? I got a very interesting phone call this morning, Lauren replied. Her voice had that sharp, controlled tone she used in court. From a man named Troy Mitchell. He wanted to know if I had any information about trust structures you might have established before your current marriage. My jaw tightened. What did you tell him? I told him to go to hell, and hung up. A pause. Then I called Margaret. She filled me in. She shouldn't have. Dad, stop. Lauren's voice softened, just slightly. I'm not calling to judge you. I'm calling because I want in. I leaned against my truck. And on what? Whatever you're doing to protect yourself from that woman. I've been waiting for this phone call for 8 years. She tried to erase me from your life. Now it's my turn. Something in my chest loosened. Not relief. Not quite. But close. You sure? I asked. I'm a lawyer, Dad. I spent 4 years in the Marine Corps prosecuting fraud cases. You think I'm going to let some interior designer and her boy-toy attorney take apart my father? I smiled. A real one this time. When can you get here? I'm already on my way. I'll be there by tonight. Troy Mitchell's office was in a glass tower downtown, the kind of building that screamed ambition but whispered insecurity. I'd never been inside, but I'd done my research. He graduated from Harvard Law 6 years ago, passed the bar on his second try, and spent most of his career chasing personal injury cases and estate disputes. He was good at looking competent. He just wasn't competent. Judith scheduled an emergency meeting with him the day after the county clerk incident. I know because Troy made the mistake of sending her a calendar invite through their shared Google account, which I still had access to. Old habit. Never assume someone's logged you out. I didn't attend the meeting. I didn't need to. But Lauren did. She walked into Troy's office at 2:15, 20 minutes after Judith arrived, dressed in a charcoal suit and carrying a leather briefcase that had seen more courtrooms than Troy ever would. According to Lauren's account later that evening, Judith's face went white the moment she walked in. What are you doing here? Judith demanded. Lauren didn't sit. She stood at the head of the table, opened her briefcase, and pulled out a folder. I'm here representing Elliot Garrison in matters related to asset protection and trust administration, Lauren said coolly. I understand you've been trying to access property records that don't belong to you. Troy cleared his throat. Miss Garrison, this is a private consultation. It stopped being private the moment you called me this morning asking about my father's financial structures, Lauren interrupted. That was a mistake, Mr. Mitchell. A big one. She slid a document across the table. Troy picked it up. His face went pale. What is this? Judith whispered. It's a cease and desist, Lauren explained. You are hereby notified to stop all attempts to access, alter, or claim ownership of any assets held under the Garrison Family Trust, established in 2016. Any further action will be considered harassment and will be met with legal consequences. Judith's hands shook. That's my house. No, Lauren said simply. It's not. It never was. You've been living in a property owned by a closed trust, of which you are not a beneficiary. You have no legal claim to it, no ownership stake, and, as of 72 hours ago, no residency rights. You can't kick me out of my own home. Again, Lauren said, her voice colder now, it's not your home. And yes, we can. The trust documents include a clause allowing for immediate revocation of residency in cases of financial malfeasance or attempted theft. Bringing an attorney into the home to coerce my father into signing over his assets qualifies. Troy finally found his voice. This is absurd. We'll fight this in court. Lauren turned to him, and I imagine the look she gave him was the same one she used on hostile witnesses. You're welcome to try, Mr. Mitchell. But let me save you some time. I've prosecuted fraud cases for the Marine Corps. I've dismantled shell corporations in federal court. And I've spent the last 6 hours reviewing every document you filed on behalf of Mrs. Garrison. She tapped the folder. You missed the residency clause. You missed the coercion activation. And you missed the fact that the power of attorney you witnessed was voided the second you walked into that room. Troy's mouth opened. Closed. So here's what's going to happen, Lauren continued. Mrs. Garrison is going to vacate the property within 30 days. She will not attempt to access any financial accounts, properties, or assets held under my father's name. And you, Mr. Mitchell, are going to advise her to comply. Because if you don't, I will personally file a bar complaint for legal malpractice and conflict of interest. Judith stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. This isn't over. Lauren smiled. Not warmly. Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet. Judith hit the bank at 9:30 on a Thursday morning, dressed like she was going to war. Tailored blazer, heels that clicked against the marble floor like gunshots, oversized sunglasses she didn't bother removing indoors. I wasn't there to see it, but the bank manager, Neil Kowalski, a guy I'd known for 12 years, called me 20 minutes after she left. Your wife just tried to withdraw from the joint savings, Neil said, his voice carefully neutral in that way bank employees perfect when they're delivering bad news. I was sitting in Lauren's rental car outside a coffee shop in Montpelier, going through paperwork. Lauren was inside grabbing us both something caffeinated and overpriced. Try, I asked. Access denied. She's listed as a secondary account holder with revoked signing privileges. Has been for about 5 weeks now. 5 weeks. Right around the time Judith started those late-night phone calls with Troy. Right around the time she stopped asking how my day was and started asking where certain documents were kept. How'd she take it? I asked. Neil hesitated. She threw her purse at the counter. Didn't break anything, but it made quite a scene. Then she demanded to speak to the branch president. And I'm the branch president. I explained that account modifications require dual authorization and that you'd file the changes through our estate planning division. She said it was illegal. I told her it was the opposite. I could picture Judith's face, that particular shade of red she turned when things didn't go her way. She threatened to sue. She threatened a lot of things, none of them particularly coherent. Neil paused. Elliot, she also tried to access the Delaware account. That got my attention. The Delaware account wasn't just savings. It was the operational fund I'd built over 15 years. Emergency reserves, liquid assets, the kind of money you don't touch unless you're restructuring your entire life. How did she even know about Delaware? I asked. She had account numbers. Partial ones. Like she'd been going through old tax returns or something. I glanced at the coffee shop window. Lauren was still in line, scrolling through her phone. What did you tell her? That the account exists, but it's under a different jurisdiction. She needed to go through their legal department, provide documentation, prove ownership stake. She asked how long that would take. I said 6 to 8 months, if she's lucky. She won't last that long, I said. No, Neil agreed. She won't. Oh, and Elliot? She also asked about your pension disbursements. My jaw tightened. The pension was for my years doing federal contract work, restructuring assets for agencies that prefer to stay off the books. It wasn't massive, but it was steady, reliable, and completely protected under federal law. What about them? She wanted to know if she could claim a portion as a spouse. I told her that federal pensions have very specific rules about spousal claims, and that she'd need a divorce decree and a court order. She didn't like that answer. Lauren emerged from the coffee shop, carrying 2 cups and a bag of pastries. She slid into the driver's seat and handed me a black coffee. At the bank, she asked quietly. I nodded. Judith tried to drain the accounts. Lauren smiled, sharp and satisfied. Good. Let her try. The more she pushes, the more documented evidence we have of financial overreach. Neil was still on the line. There's one more thing. She asked about a medical account. Said there was some kind of surgical expense account she needed access to. I froze. What surgical account? She mentioned a clinic. Something about outstanding balances. She seemed pretty desperate about it. After I hung up, Lauren was watching me with that calculating expression she'd inherited from her mother. What surgical account? She asked. I have no idea, I said honestly. I don't have any medical accounts set up for her. Lauren pulled out her laptop, fingers already flying across the keyboard. Give me 5 minutes. 4 minutes later, she turned the screen toward me. It was a billing statement from a cosmetic surgery clinic in White Plains. The patient name, Judith Garrison. The procedures, rhinoplasty, chin augmentation, eyelid lift. The total, $127,000. I stared at the number. She never mentioned any of this. Because she paid for it using a credit card linked to your business accounts, Lauren said, scrolling down. Look at the payment history. She's been making minimum payments for 18 months. The balance is ballooning because of interest. How is that even possible? You gave her a supplementary card for business expenses, remember? Dinners with clients, design consultations, that kind of thing. She's been using it for personal procedures and hiding the statements. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Not anger. Not betrayal, just a deepening understanding of how long this had been going on. Can they come after me for this? I asked. Lauren shook her head. Not if we play it right. The card's in her name. The account's flagged as supplementary, not joint. We can make the case that she committed fraud by misusing business credit for personal expenses. The clinic might not be happy, but they'll go after her, not you. She closed the laptop. Dad, how much else don't you know? I looked out the window at the quiet street, the autumn leaves drifting down, the ordinary people living ordinary lives. I'm starting to think everything, I said. The envelope arrived at Judith's sister's house on a Monday afternoon. I know because Caroline, Judith's younger sister, the one who'd always been skeptical of me, called Judith in a panic, and Judith, in turn, called Troy. And Troy, because he was sloppy and overconfident, CC'd Judith on an email to his paralegal that accidentally went to an old group chain I was still copied on. Technology. It betrays the careless. The envelope contained photographs. Not explicit, not illegal, just deeply, politically inconvenient. Judith and Congressman Peter Aldrich. At a restaurant in Hartford. At a fundraiser in Greenwich. Getting into his car outside a hotel in Stamford. The photos were dated, time-stamped, and remarkably high resolution. Professional work. The kind you hire someone for when you want documentation, not just gossip. Peter Aldrich was 52, married, father of 3, and running for his 4th term in Connecticut's 2nd District. He was also the recipient of $48,000 in campaign contributions over the past 2 years. Contributions that came from shell LLCs I traced back to accounts Judith had access to. My accounts. Lauren laid the photos out on the table in her hotel room like evidence in a trial. Which in a way they were. When did you take these? I asked. I didn't, she replied. I hired someone, a retired investigator I worked with in the Corps. He's been following her for 3 weeks. I picked up one of the photos. Judith and Aldrich, sitting close, her hand on his arm. The date stamp read September 23rd. 3 weeks before her birthday party. 3 weeks before she demanded I sign over control. You think they were planning this together? I asked. Lauren shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe she just needed someone with influence. Aldrich has connections. Legal connections, financial connections. If she wanted to move money around quietly, he'd be a useful ally. And the campaign contributions? Illegal, Lauren said flatly. You can't funnel personal money into political campaigns through shell companies. That's textbook finance violation. If this gets to the FEC, Aldrich is finished. And Judith goes down with him. I set the photo down. You planning to send this to someone? Not yet. But I made copies. Lots of copies. And I've already sent one set to a journalist I trust. She's sitting on it for now. But if Judith pushes this fight into court, if she tries to claim you're hiding assets or acting in bad faith, these go public. I looked at my daughter. 34 years old. Sharp as a blade. Loyal in a way I didn't deserve. When did you get so ruthless? I asked quietly. She met my eyes. I learned from you, Dad. You taught me that preparation isn't paranoia. It's survival. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk. This is Peter Aldrich. I showed Lauren. She smiled. That was fast, she said. I called the number. Aldrich picked up on the second ring. Mr. Garrison, he said, voice tight. Professional. Scared. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Has there? I received some photographs today. Very concerning photographs. I want you to know that my relationship with your wife has been entirely professional. Is that what you call $48,000 in illegal campaign contributions? I asked. Professional. Silence. Mr. Garrison, I don't know what you think you know. I know enough to end your career, Congressman. I know you've been taking money laundered through LLCs tied to accounts I control. I know you've been meeting privately with my wife for months. And I know that if any of this reaches the Federal Election Commission, you won't just lose your seat. You'll face criminal charges. His breathing was audible now. Shallow. Panicked. What do you want? He asked finally. I want you to distance yourself from Judith. Publicly. Completely. No more meetings. No more phone calls. No more favors. And I want a signed affidavit stating that any financial contributions you receive from her were done without your knowledge of their origin. That's non-negotiable. I finished. You have 48 hours. After that, the photos go to the Hartford Courant, the FEC, and every political blogger in Connecticut. I hung up. Lauren was watching me with something close to pride. Feel good? She asked. No, I said honestly. But it's necessary. She nodded. Welcome to the war, Dad. The first thing Judith lost was access to our tax software. She discovered it on a Tuesday afternoon when she tried to log in to review last year's returns, probably looking for ammunition to use against me in court. The screen blinked at her with a message I'd programmed weeks ago. User credentials no longer valid. Contact system administrator. I was the system administrator. Lauren was with me when Judith called, her voice climbing into that register she reserved for full-blown panic. Elliot, I can't access the tax files, she said without preamble. The system says my login doesn't work. That's correct, I replied calmly. I was sitting in Margaret's office, 70 miles north, watching autumn rain streak down the windows. What do you mean that's correct? Those are our taxes. I need access. They're not our taxes, Judith. They're my taxes. You were listed as a spouse on joint filings, but the actual accounts, the software, the records, those were always under my administrative control. When you try to seize financial authority, you triggered a security protocol I'd built into the system. Silence. Then, you planned this. I prepared for this. I corrected. There's a difference. She hung up. 3 hours later, she tried to access our shared cloud storage. Gone. The folder labeled Garrison Financial Records that had existed for 8 years simply wasn't there anymore. Not deleted, relocated. Moved to an encrypted archive she'd need a court order and a computer forensics team to access. Every shared spreadsheet, every scanned document, every digital receipt and bank statement vanished. Lauren watched me work through the final stages of the migration, transferring files from shared drives to a secure server housed in Margaret's office. Everything backed up, everything documented, everything locked behind passwords Judith would never guess. She's going to lose her mind, Lauren observed. She already has, I replied, clicking through folders with methodical precision. Now she's just realizing it. My phone buzzed. An email from Judith, sent to both me and Troy. Subject: immediate restoration of access required. The message was 3 paragraphs of legal threats, demands, and increasingly desperate pleas for me to stop this childish game. Troy had clearly helped her write it. The language was too formal, too calculated. But the desperation bled through anyway. I forwarded it to Lauren without responding. Want me to reply? She asked. No. Let her sit with it. That evening, Judith discovered the audio file. I'd left it in her email inbox, attached to a message with no subject line. Just a single MP3, time-stamped and authenticated. It was her own voice, recorded from the study 3 weeks ago. Just sign it. Troy's here as a witness. This is simple, Elliot. Don't make it complicated. Then Troy's chuckle. Well, that went easier than expected. Then Judith's laugh. Told you he'd fold. I'd recorded the entire interaction using a voice-activated device I'd installed in the study 6 months earlier, hidden inside a bookshelf speaker she'd never once questioned. The audio was crystal clear, admissible in court. Devastating. Lauren listened to it once, her expression unreadable. You've had this the whole time, she said. Since the day it happened. And you didn't tell me. I didn't need to. Not until now. I closed my laptop. She wanted control. I gave her rope. Now she's understanding what it feels like to have everything you thought was yours disappear. My phone rang. Judith. I let go to voicemail. She called again. And again. On the 4th attempt, I answered. What do you want? Her voice was raw, stripped of pretense. I want you to understand something, I said quietly. Every document you're looking for, every file you think you need, it's all gone from your reach. Not destroyed, just moved, archived, protected. You spent 14 years not caring how things worked, assuming I'd always be there to manage it. Now you're learning what happens when the person holding everything together decides to let go. You can't do this. I already did. The question now is what you're going to do about it. I hung up. Lauren looked at me with something close to respect. You know she's going to fight this with everything she has. Let her, I said. She's fighting ghosts. Everything she thinks she can grab is already gone. Judith's brother called me on a Saturday morning, which should have been my first clue that something had shifted. Daniel Foster, younger than Judith by 4 years, chronically underemployed, perpetually optimistic despite life repeatedly kicking him in the teeth. had never called me directly in the 8 years I'd known him. "Elliot," he said, voice tight. "Can we meet? Just you and me. Not Judith." We met at a diner off Interstate 89, halfway between where he lived in Lebanon and where I was staying in Burlington. He looked older than I remembered, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes. Life as Judith's younger brother had clearly taken its toll. He ordered coffee. Didn't touch it. "I'm losing my house," Daniel said without preamble. "Bank's foreclosing in 30 days. I called Judith last week, asked if she could help. She told me to ask you." I leaned back in the booth. "What did she say exactly?" "She said you'd stolen everything from her, that she was broke, and that if I wanted money I should ask the man who destroyed our family." He met my eyes. "Is that true?" "Parts of it." Daniel exhaled slowly. "I need $12,000. That's it. Enough to catch up on payments and keep the roof over my kids' heads. I've got a job lined up starting next month. I just need to bridge the gap." I studied him. "Why come to me instead of your sister?" "Because Judith's never helped me with anything in her life," he said bluntly. "She forgot my 40th birthday. She didn't show up to my daughter's high school graduation. She sent a Christmas card every year with a generic signature and no gift. You, on the other hand, helped me pay for my son's medical bills 3 years ago when he broke his arm. You didn't even tell Judith about it." I remembered. For $1,000, wired directly to the hospital. I'd listed it as a business expense and never mentioned it. "What do you know about what's happening between Judith and me?" I asked. Daniel shrugged. "I know she's angry. I know she thinks you've been hiding money. And I know our parents think you're the villain because that's what she's telling them." He paused. "But I also know Judith. She's my sister, and I love her, but she's been using people her whole life. I just didn't think she'd do it to her husband." I pulled out my phone, made a few taps, and showed him the screen. "Check your account in about 10 minutes. His eyes widened. You're just giving me the money?" "I'm loaning it to you. Interest-free. Pay me back when you can. Or don't. But there's a condition." "What?" "You cut contact with Judith. Completely. No phone calls, no family gatherings, no intermediary messages. She's going to ask you to testify against me, to say I've been controlling or manipulative. I need you to refuse." Daniel's jaw tightened. "She already asked me. Last week. And I told her I'd think about it." He looked down at his coffee. "But the truth is, Elliot, you've been more family to me than she has. I'm not going to lie in court just because we shared DNA." We shook hands. When I left the diner, I had one less enemy in Judith's corner. That afternoon, Lauren met me at a storage unit on the outskirts of Montpelier. Inside were 17 boxes, each carefully labeled and inventoried. Antique furniture, sterling silver tea sets, oil paintings, jewelry. Every piece had belonged to my mother. "This is what Judith sold?" Lauren asked, running her hand over a mahogany writing desk. "Over 3 years," I confirmed. "She'd take something from the house, claim she was donating it or having it restored, then sell it through auction houses. I tracked every sale, bought back every piece through intermediaries." Lauren opened a velvet box. Inside was my mother's engagement ring, a simple gold band with a small diamond. "This must have cost you a fortune to recover." $47,000 total, I said. But it wasn't about the money. It was about making sure she couldn't erase my family history. "What are you going to do with it all?" I picked up a framed photograph of my mother, taken sometime in the 1970s. She was young, smiling, holding me as a baby. "I'm giving it to you," I said. "All of it. Consider it your inheritance." She tried to steal it once. "I'm making sure she can never touch it again." Lauren's eyes glistened. "Dad, your grandmother would have wanted you to have it. Not Judith. You." She hugged me then, the first real embrace we'd shared in years. And for a moment, in a storage unit surrounded by rescued memories, I felt like I'd done something right. The envelope arrived at Judith's temporary apartment, a cramped 2-bedroom she was renting month to month in West Hartford, on a gray Monday morning in late November. I know the exact timing because the courier service I'd hired provided GPS tracking and a digital signature confirmation. She signed for it at 8:47 a.m. By 9:15, my phone was ringing. I was sitting in Lauren's new office in Burlington. She'd opened a private practice 2 weeks earlier, specializing in asset protection and family law. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "Elliot." Judith's voice was different now, smaller, the sharp edges worn down by 3 months of losing. I got your letter. Our letter, I corrected. It's from the Garrison Family Trust. Lauren's the trustee now. Silence. Then, it says I have 14 days to vacate the house. That's correct. The grace period expired. You've been living in trust property without authorization for 93 days. The legal eviction notice is a formality. I have nowhere to go. You have options. You've always had options. You just never liked any of them that didn't involve controlling my assets. Her breath hitched. There's something else in here. A DNA report. Why would you send me a DNA report? This was the part Lauren had insisted on. The final piece. The one that made everything else make sense. Because you try to challenge Lauren's authority as trustee, I said calmly. You filed a motion claiming she had a conflict of interest. Your attorney suggested that perhaps Lauren wasn't actually my daughter, that maybe the trust should be invalidated on those grounds. I never said that. Troy said it. In a court filing. Which means you authorized it. I leaned back in my chair. So we had the test done. 99.97% probability of paternity. Lauren's my daughter, Judith. She always has been. And now there's scientific proof that your attempt to discredit her was baseless. That's not. I didn't mean. There's also a second DNA report in that envelope, I continued. From a child you've never met. A boy named Cameron. 12 years old when I first met him through the foster care system. 16 now. I've been his legal guardian for 4 years. The adoption was finalized last month. The line went completely silent. You adopted a child, Judith finally whispered. During our marriage. I became a foster parent during our marriage. The adoption happened after you tried to seize my assets. Cameron needed stability. I could provide it. You were too busy redecorating houses you didn't own. Notice I've been mentoring a kid from the youth center every Thursday for 3 years. You never told me. You never asked what I did on Thursdays. You assumed I was working late. I was. Just not at the office. I glanced at Lauren, who was watching me with quiet pride. Cameron's 17 now. Full scholarship to Cornell. Engineering program. He wants to design infrastructure for developing countries. That's the kind of legacy I'm building, Judith. Not beach houses and designer furniture. People, why are you telling me this? Because you're going to see the trust distribution when this goes to court. Cameron's listed as a beneficiary. So is Lauren. So is Daniel. Actually, your brother's mortgage is paid off as of this morning. My first wife's medical bills are covered through a fund I established. Even your parents have a small stipend, though they don't know it yet. And me. Her voice was barely audible. You're listed as a former spouse entitled to nothing. Because you brought nothing, built nothing, and tried to take everything. I stood, walked to the window, overlooking the quiet street. The house goes on the market next week. Proceeds go into the trust. You have 14 days to remove your personal belongings. After that, anything left behind becomes trust property. This is cruel. No, I said quietly. This is consequences. You want to play games with a man who builds lifeboats for sinking ships. You just didn't realize I'd already built mine years ago, and there was never a seat for someone who'd drill holes in the hull. I hung up before she could respond. Lauren looked at me across the desk. How do you feel? Tired, I admitted, but finished. The DNA test with Cameron was a nice touch, she said. Showing her you'd build a whole family she didn't even know existed. It wasn't a touch. It was the truth. She spent 14 years in my house and never once noticed I was raising a son. Where is he now? College visit. MIT. He's deciding between there and Cornell. I smiled slightly. Smart kid. Reminds me of you at that age. Lauren's expression softened. You did good, Dad. We did good. I corrected. You came back when I needed you. That matters more than any trust document. For months later, I stood on a balcony in Lagos, Portugal, watching fishing boats navigate the harbor under a sky so blue it looked photoshopped. The apartment behind me was modest. 2 bedrooms, white walls, terracotta floors. Nothing like the showcase house Judith had designed. This place felt lived in. Real. Lauren had helped me find it. Cameron had helped me pack. The house on Lexington Ridge sold for $840,000. After fees and closing costs, the trust cleared $792,000. It was divided according to the distribution plan I'd written 5 years ago. 40% to Lauren, 30% to Cameron's education fund, 20% to a charitable foundation supporting foster care programs, 10% to immediate family members who'd earned it. Judith got a letter from the trust attorney informing her that her belongings had been inventoried, stored, and made available for pickup. She never collected them. Last I heard, they were donated to a women's shelter in New Haven. Troy Mitchell lost his law license 6 weeks after our case concluded. The Connecticut Bar Association found that he'd committed malpractice by failing to identify the coercion clause, conflict of interest by maintaining a personal relationship with a client, and witness tampering by contacting Lauren without proper authorization. He's working as a paralegal now. If he's lucky. Congressman Aldrich announced he wouldn't seek re-election. The FEC investigation quietly closed after he paid a substantial fine and agreed to stricter campaign finance oversight. Judith's name appeared in exactly one footnote of the final report. She threatened to sue me for defamation. Her new attorney, not Troy, advised her that truth isn't defamation. My phone buzzed. A text from Cameron. Accepted to MIT. Engineering. Full ride. Thank you for everything, Dad. Dad. He started calling me that 3 months ago. It still made something warm settle in my chest. Lauren called an hour later. You see Cameron's news? She asked. I did. You. He texted me right after you. Said his annoying older sister would want to know. She laughed. I like this kid. He likes you too. Says you're scarier than his calculus professor. Good. Someone needs to keep him humble. A pause. How's Portugal? Quiet. Warm. Nobody knows me here. It's perfect. You coming back for Cameron's graduation? Wouldn't miss it. And after that, I looked out at the ocean, at the endless blue horizon. I don't know yet. Maybe I'll stay here. Maybe I'll go somewhere else. The trust is set up to run itself. You're the trustee. Cameron's got his path. I'm just free. You earned it, Dad. After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine, local vintage, nothing fancy, and sat on the balcony as the sun began to set. Somewhere back in Connecticut, Judith was probably still trying to figure out how she'd lost everything. Somewhere in Massachusetts, Cameron was celebrating his future. Somewhere in Vermont, Lauren was building a law practice that would help people protect themselves from exactly what Judith had tried to do to me. And I was here, 60 years old, financially secure, legally untouchable, surrounded by people I'd chosen, not just married into. I'd spent 32 years building lifeboats for other people's disasters. It took me 14 years of marriage to realize I needed to build one for myself. The wine was good. The sunset was better. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe.